Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. It's that time of week again. Everybody's favorite segment, the power rankings. Guys, I'm sorry. My mic, I just spent the past 20 minutes or so trying to fix it. Couldn't get it fixed, so you're going to have to deal with a little bit of sound issues this week without a mic, but that's all right. Before I jump into this, if you are new, please subscribe to the channel. We are 1K. We are going for that. We're so close, and I think we can do it real soon. If you are new and we do these every week, join the community. I would love to have you. Otherwise, guys, we're just going to jump right into it. I'm not going to go too far into this team. Chicago White Sox at number 30. I don't think there's too much of a debate here about which team is the worst in the MLB. They just continue to be worse and worse. They got one win this week early against Kansas City, going 1-2 in that series before getting swept over the weekend by the Phillies. They're in for a long season. It's tough to see a team like this that has such a pedigree suffering, but that's just how she goes once in a while. Next up, we got a new low for the Rockies, I believe, this season. Might have had them here at the first week of the year. 0-3 against Philly as well, and 1-1 against the Seattle Mariners. They do have another game tonight that they're going to be playing that's being a makeup game for the postpone on Friday. So we do have a little bit of that, but Colorado just has lost pretty much every series, it feels like, this year. A lot of issues with some of their young guys not really coming into fruition. Of course, they have their main pitching on the IL, but in terms of where they're going in the future, Colorado, I am a lot worried about. Number 28, I did move them up one spot. 1-2 against San Fran, 2-2 against the Cubs. This week, I think, is more of what we thought the Miami Marlins would be. They'd be somewhat competitive, picking up wins here and there. They weren't as bad as they have been in the past. I don't know if they're the worst team in the National League as a whole, so I did move them up one spot. I think the Marlins are a little bit better than their record shows. Of course, they're dealing with some pitching injuries themselves and stuff like that, but their offense somehow gets going once in a while. But series split 2-2 against the Cubs. Pretty excited about that. Number 27, got the Oakland A's 1-2 against St. Louis. Got swept by the Guardians over the weekend. I did have a little bit of momentum in the A's, but I think they're starting to come back down to where they probably belong. We know they don't really spend. They don't make their team super strong. They have a lot of high draft picks. They have some key guys that have made impacts. But as a whole, when they're matching up against other MLB level teams, I don't think they're very much capable. They were ahead of this team, but I think 26, they've earned it this week after a little bit of bounce back. They did lose to the A's a couple weeks ago, but this week Washington had a pretty good week, really. 2-1 against the Dodgers. They win a series against a top tier team like the Dodgers, and then they go 2-1 against the Astros, which, while the Astros are having a struggling season, it's still relatively important because the Astros have gone to that championship series in the AL for so many years, for almost a decade. So overall, a 4-2 week for Washington. I think of all the teams we're talking about on this bottom row, the team that has the furthest, best potential going forward as a whole might be Washington, so we might see them move up in the coming weeks. Next up, number 25. I think they're a pretty hot start. I don't want to say hot. I don't want to say incredible because it's still subpar start. Came to a crashing halt this weekend when they got swept by the Cincinnati Reds over the weekend. No wins there. And early in the week, 2-2 against Tampa Bay, a team that if they wanted to be in the playoff conversation, they would have had to. They have to beat teams like Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is on the bubble, and you got to beat teams like that if you want to be part of the conversation. And only to split it, not really going to be good enough. And then following up with a series sweep, rough week for the Angels. No way I can move them up. At this point, they're flirting with running down if they don't get it together. Another team that's kind of struggling still, 2-1 against Oakland. So they do have a series win this week. Sonny Gray had 2 pitching times this week, and he's won both games, so that's something to be impressive. But St. Louis gets swept over the weekend here against Milwaukee. I said Sonny Gray won both games, but he didn't win today. He had a good outing, though, but swept against Milwaukee, a division foe, a team that they're going to have to beat if any conversation of playoffs. Maybe I should have them lower, but I'm going to hold them a little bit. They do seem to be strong at certain times, but overall, I think they're far away from the playoffs like the rest of the teams we have covered so far. Next up, just incredible. I had them so much higher hopes all season long. My prediction video at the beginning of the year had them higher. Last week, I think I had them in this second row. I can't quite recall. they might have had the single-handedly biggest drop in power rankings history, just how bad it's been going for Minnesota. 0-3 against Baltimore, so they can't even take a win there. They lose a series to Detroit. Now they're down in that series after 3 series with Detroit already this year. They're down there big. Minnesota, after watching all of these teams now for a couple of weeks, I don't see how Minnesota really matches up and wins against the teams ahead of them. It's been a rough start, and it's starting to maybe be this is the true colors of Minnesota. I'm already kind of sold. Sometimes I exaggerate too early, or I don't adjust a team too quickly. This time I felt like they really need to be adjusted, and quickly. Number 22, you got the San Francisco Giants, 2-1 against Miami, 2-2 against Arizona. A big split this weekend against a team that, if they're going to have a shot at the playoffs, they got to beat this team, but they're at least matching a team that went to the World Series last year. So that's a big, important part. National League West, of course, is going to be a difficult division to make any headway in, and you're going to have to win those division matchups. They did play their part well. They won a series against Miami, a team that's struggling, and they won it. I'm still not sold that long-term San Francisco is going to be a competitive team in the entire playoff race, but at this point in time, they're competitive, they're winning games, and they're moving up in terms of what I see of them. Number 21, and I think a lot of people might have these guys a little bit higher. I just am not sold that even though they've picked up wins, they're above 500, they're a team that's winning games. They win a series against a Minnesota team, which really helped destroy Minnesota's power rankings as a whole. They had a tough series against Texas to start the week, going 1-3. In Detroit, while they're going to be in the playoff hunt, I don't know if they haven't shown anything to me that shows they're going to be a consistent cloud, a team that I can get behind to win games. Right now, they're a little bit borderline. Reminds me a lot of Angels in the past, a team that maybe had a lot of momentum, a lot of positivity behind them, just never got the performance. I think Detroit might fall into that. Of course, they have times where they're going to show me otherwise, and they have time to do that. April is still in the books, like still lots of time to do it. Number 20, another big falling team, and I couldn't really support them anymore. It's just been too much pitching failure for the Houston Astros. Sure, they might be getting Verlander back anytime now. They have a couple other major starters on the injured reserve list, but I'm not so sure that having these pitchers come back is going to save them at this point. This bullpen has just been atrocious. The starters that have tried to step in have been relatively bad, except for Blanco, who's been pretty incredible. He's been a savior, really. There's been absolutely a storyline here. Houston blowing games, giving up a lot of runs, and I am concerned that their lineup, while Altuve and all that is aging, they still have some young guys, of course. But I don't know. This is a very competitive American League. This might be Houston coming back down to earth. Maybe I over-exaggerated. Maybe this streak has really got to me. But I'm seeing a team that's struggling to win games, close out games, and that's Houston this week. 0-3 against Atlanta, a top team. They just get absolutely swept. And then they play Washington, a team where in the past, this is how Houston starts momentum's going. They lose the series to Washington. Of course, an up-and-coming team, a team that's probably going to be playing above their head in that series. But Houston needs to start finding ways to win, because this is a tough AL West. And right now, I do believe Seattle is a slightly stronger team in this division. Seattle, after pretty shaky start to the season, came back and bounced in with a big week this week, sweeping Cincinnati, a team I do have ahead of them on the power rankings, more of a reason of playoff chances. I think Seattle had a good week, but we can't forget how the rest of it's been going. It's whether or not they can build off of this, and this week they got coming up is massive. They're playing the 2 World Series teams. They're playing Texas, they're playing Arizona. If they want to keep showing me that they're a little bit more for real than I had anticipated, they're going to have to continue this momentum with a week that they're coming into. Next up, number 18. Team that's record is probably better than their standings here. They go 1-2 against Cleveland, and in my books, that is a big series in terms of power ranking wise. A team like Cleveland is someone that I had in the same area as Boston at the start of the season. Both teams have relatively surprised me so far with their performance, especially on offense. I didn't realize that these guys were going to be able to put in the runs they have. Boston did follow up with this weekend after that tough series loss with a huge sweep against another team I have ahead of them on the rankings, against the Pittsburgh Pirates. And we're going to talk about them shortly. But Boston, they're trudging along. The only thing that's really holding them back in this haven't seen them really play inside their division too much. We're going to see them play against the Yankees. We got to see them play against the Rays. We have to see them play against the Jays and of course the Orioles. Like, we're going to have to see them, and part of the power rankings is how you match up with your division. And right now, I still consider them the weakest team in that division. Number 17, just kind of quickly touched on them when they got swept by Seattle. Not a great start, but they bounced back, and they bounced back with a vengeance against the Angels, sweeping them. So a 3-3 week. I like seeing this, definitely in a young team like the Cincinnati Reds, a team that gets a sweep against them, coming back, not letting them kick them down and sweeping a team that's much lower on the power rankings. So got to be a little bit excited about that. Other teams in the division struggled this week, especially number 16. I just talked about the Pittsburgh Pirates. They struggled this week big time. I think they're the only team that did not find a win this week, which is relatively bad. They were number 9, so it's like a 7-spot drop after such a hot start in April. Some concerns when your team can lose 6 in a row. You're not going to be one of these top row teams. It's really not possible. And I don't know if Pittsburgh has the all-star talent for that stopgap of a loss streak like this. Paul Skeens, of course, we've been hearing about him in AAA. He's been lighting it up, but he's not going to come up to the Pirates, make a huge difference. He's going to be on an innings limit and all that stuff. So right now, Pittsburgh really took a step back in their playoff race, etc. etc. Number 15, we're wearing their hat today because they were awesome. The Mets had a great week. They went 5-1 on the week, sweeping the Pirates. Big series win against the Dodgers. They're showing that, hey, the first couple of weeks, I really started to sell them out. I'm like, oh, this might be the same Mets team as before. But does not seem to be the case. I think over the past 2 weeks and a little bit, they might have the best record in all of the MLB. So of all the teams, they are streaking up in this middle of the pack that we've been talking about probably since, who knows, like since here. Like, all these teams are so close together. If you look at the standings as a whole, the records are so close together, anything can happen. So Mets are the one team streaking up. Number 14, I got the Kansas City Royals. 500 week for them. They win their series against the White Sox team. They got to win 2-1, no sweep, nothing like that. And they go in to play Baltimore for the second time already this season, and they lose this series again, 2-1. They had the Friday win. They had a chance to build on that, but Baltimore's offense was just too much for them. So far, their rotation's been strong, but Baltimore showed that they can be exposed as well. A team that is really showing that the Central Division is wide open. I have no idea how that division is really going to go. Number 13, 1-2 against the Cubs, 2-2 against San Fran. Diamondbacks are a team that I thought were going to perform a lot better. I know with the World Series, the playoffs, all that hype around them last year, I thought the rotation is top in the league. We see them again this week put up a 16-run game against San Francisco. So, like, we know the offense is there. We're seeing Kentel, Marte, and all these guys just continue to, like, surprise on the offense side, and it just doesn't seem to be all coming together. We have an under 500 Diamondbacks club. Don't suspect they're going to stay that way, but right now it's a little bit of a slow start for them. And in a tough division, it's making them get pushed. They're slowly getting pushed down the rest of the standings here. Number 12, a team that I've been kind of hard pressed finding a spot for on this board. They went 2-2 against the Angels. They lose the series to the Yankees, almost having to come back to win the series today. But overall, Tampa Bay, you could make arguments for them to be as low as here. Like, I think in all cases, I do think the pitching just continues to get things done. It wasn't a great week. It's going to be important for them to at least have a 500 or better week this week. Otherwise, we got a lot of hot teams potentially, like even Boston, right behind them in terms of the grand scheme of things. Tampa Bay kind of holding on to this second row. Didn't really see anything this week that got me super concerned about where they're at, whereas some of these other teams, I got some concerns. So that's kind of why I got them number 12. Number 11, moving on up week after week. They're just winning. And at that point, I got to start to recognize that even though they lost Bieber early in the season here, they're figuring it out. The offense seems to be doing it. Ramirez is somehow carrying this team along with the other guys. They had an awesome week. They swept the A's, a team that is going to be in the playoffs, taking advantage of a bottom team. I like to see that kind of stuff. And then they have an early week win against Boston, a team that's right there in the middle of the pack, a team that they're probably going to be competing with down the stretch to be 500 or better. So really excited with what the Guardians have done this week. And at this point, I do consider them the favorite in that division, I believe, based on this strictly. They're the highest ranked AL Central team. Next up, we have the San Diego Padres. They started the week off great, playing up against the Milwaukee Brewers and winning that series 2-1. But then they host the Blue Jays. My Blue Jays roll in there Friday, Saturday, win both those games. Some concerns. The pitching was not looking great. Some of the defense was looking a little shaky for them, but they do salvage the series today with a big win. So I do still think them to be a strong team. 3-3 against two top 10 teams that you're going to see in a minute. Pretty good week in terms of power rankings. You're not going to get punished at all for going 500 against top teams. If anything, it gets me more confident that maybe I got San Diego right in the right spot. Number 9, I do have those Toronto Blue Jays. What is that now? I think that's 5 series in a row that the Blue Jays have won. So ever since I was sold them down to 16, I was had no idea that their offense was going to be able to do anything. Varsho seems to be starting to carry this team. Vladdy in the top of the lineup, still kind of cold. So the pitching rotation and the bullpen has been a big part of what has kept this Blue Jays team afloat. And right now they're above 500. They've won 5 series in a row. So it's hard for me to say that they don't deserve to be there. Beating the Yankees earlier in the week and then the Padres, some things to build on. What the one thing I am concerned, they should have found a sweep in one of these games, one of these series. They're up 2-0 in both series and couldn't find a sweep. So that does concern me. In a long season, I want you to be able to get these momentums and build up some big win streaks. Number 8, got the Chicago Cubs, 2-1 against Arizona, 2-2 against Miami. So not really a great week against teams that are below than them. But I think at the same time, I think in the grand scheme of things, Chicago has shown to me that they've got a consistent kind of style. The scores aren't getting too out of whack too much, except here and there, right? Most of the games are relatively close, and if it wasn't for a blown save, I think in one of the games they would have had a big sweep on Arizona, if I do recall. But guys, Chicago kind of holding on to this 8th spot. This was really difficult, I'll be honest, from you, 6 to 11. Kind of difficult for me to figure out, and honestly, you could probably shuffle up a lot of these teams. Number 7, they're kind of fighting to stay alive in this one. Started the week off 3-1 against Detroit, and I like that. I like Texas doing that, but then now they're playing a top team, Atlanta. They've lost the first 2 games. They're playing the 3rd game right now, just starting, and I'm not sure, with the injuries and all that Texas has been dealing with, I think the one thing working out for them is their division doesn't seem like it's going to be super competitive right now, but they are the reigning champs, and I got to give some credit where credit is due. Sure, they're going to have a little bit of a slow start here, but I still think on the grand scheme of things, they are a top club. The offense seems to be getting things done for sure. Number 6, the only team that I believe went undefeated so far this week. There is one more, but they still have a game to play. The Philadelphia Phillies, 3-0 against Colorado, 3-0 against the White Sox. So they went 6-0 against the 2 bottom teams, but they didn't lose. And for me, that means a lot about a winning team. We saw Zach Wheeler have one of his best outings of the season. And if they can get this all going, this team, we talk about them for the past few years. They've somewhat underperformed during the regular season, managing to get there in the playoffs for the most part. But Philly, top team, I think top 6, well deserved. Number 5, the Milwaukee Brewers, 1-2 against San Diego. So a little bit of a bump there early in the week against a tough team, San Diego. And then they do what I expect teams that are going to dominate their division to do. They beat up on the lower teams in their division, sweeping the Cardinals. Big step of momentum for Milwaukee. Those 2 teams have battled so many years now for that top spot. I think Milwaukee has finally said, St. Louis, you're not going to be a part of this race anymore. It's mine for the taking. And with Pittsburgh and Cincinnati kind of shuffling this week, nothing too good. I think Cubs right now are the biggest competitor for the Brewers. Number 4, moving up 1 spot, 3-0 against Minnesota, 2-1 against Kansas City. Just a domination of the Central Division the Orioles had this week, and I had to move them up. And honestly, you can make an argument at this point for them to be even higher. I didn't move them higher because I still think the top 3 teams when they face off would have a little bit of an advantage, especially if we're looking at like a 7-game series matching up. But Orioles really bounced back after what was some questionable offensive performances over the weeks before, but this week they got to be pretty excited, taking care of business after going down 1-0 to Kansas City, beating up on Minnesota while they're down and they're just beating them up. This is what I like to see. Orioles still struggling with Jackson Holliday. He's just not hitting the ball whatsoever, and they're still winning, so they've got to have some excitement there. Number 3, dropping a couple of spots, losing both series this week, 1-2 to Washington, 1-2 to the Mets. I guess you could argue at this point that they could be lower. The Dodgers just haven't been able to put the wins together this season. I can't quite put my finger on what it is. Maybe it's the pitching as a whole. I haven't followed like the Dodgers as closely. Some of these other teams, I see the box scores, I see them losing, but I also see Mookie Betts playing out of his mind. So it's tough to understand why they're not really putting it all together right now. Sure, I know they're going to have a couple guys coming back in the pitching rotation, which are going to make a big difference. So it's up to the Dodgers. They need to kind of show me they're hanging on to this spot by the thing. We got a couple of strong teams behind. I think this top row is undisputable who's in the top row, but maybe you can rearrange a couple of the spots. But for me, the top 2 are without a question. Right now, the Yankees at the number 2 spot. Just think offensively, Juan Soto and all that, he just fits in so well to this team. This team can hit all throughout the lineup. The pitching has surprised me as a whole. Some of these guys, I didn't know if Nestor Cortez was going to be able to deliver like he had in the past. He seems to be doing it. We saw the fake pitch, all that fun stuff. But at the same time, it wasn't the best week for them. Losing the series to the Jays. They did bounce back this weekend and win the series against the Rays. So going 3-3 in the division, especially in the AL East, is not going to be a knock against you at the very least. And for the Yankees, I think that they're going to keep being able, in the long term, beat up on the rest of this division. I think this is their division. Of course, the O's, we're waiting for that first matchup. Let's see it happen. Number 1, I don't know. This is, for me, a lock. I don't think there's anyone really else that deserves it at this point. Everyone else kind of seems to have blemishes. Atlanta, maybe they had a blemish last week, didn't have a great week last week. But this week, 3-0 against Houston, 2-0 against Texas so far. Just a 5-0 week, and they're playing again right now. They are my top team in the MLB in the power rankings, and I think they're the team to beat. So there you guys have it. The power rankings has been a little wild so far this year. It's been hard to put my finger on a few of these teams. I made some pretty big adjustments with a couple, like with Minnesota, Houston, for instance. Cleveland starting to move up. Mets starting to make a name for themselves. A lot going on here, so let me know what you guys think. Comment below what you would change, where am I out to lunch, etc., etc., and we will see you for that next video.